Hello viewers, Gamer Inspector 4700 here. So, Breath of the Wild. I've been playing it a lot and it's actually, in my opinion, one of the best Zelda games today. But actually, despite the game being out for a couple of weeks, there's actually a lot of unexplained mysteries in the game. The biggest one being the permanent placement on the timeline of Breath of the Wild. There have been a lot of different theories, and I am here to talk about them and talk about where I personally think the Breath of the Wild should take place on the timeline. There are a couple of different theories out there, with the most notable videos that I found on YouTube to be by Zeltik, Nintendo World TV Report, and Dr. Wily, which I highly recommend you go check out. I'll be using evidence mentioned by all of these, but I will be constructing my own theory on when the game takes place. We can find my theory is true by the clues we received in both inside the game and outside of it. Before I start, I am discrediting all the location names on the map because I just think those were thrown in for the sake of referencing, and if we used every last one of those as some kind of clue to where it takes place on the timeline, the game would literally take place on no timeline and be non-canon like Hyrule Warriors. But it is canon according to AJ and Noma, and takes place after Ocarina of Time. So, let's get started. Let's look at the evidence. First, in an interview with game developer AJ Inoma, it's confirmed that the game does take place after Ocarina of Time. Many thought that would somehow take place in the adult Link timeline, with their evidence in the form of the Koroks and Rito people. Another in-game object that supports this theory is an ore known as rock salt. Its description reads, crystallized salt from the ancient sea commonly used to season meals. With the fact that the rock salt can be found all around Hyrule is a pretty strong argument that it takes place in the adult Link timeline, but there's a fair amount of counter-evidence. The most notable one being the location of the Master Sword. The last time we see the Master Sword in the adult timeline is when it's plunged into Ganon's head, drowning with Hyrule. The fact that the Master Sword is found in the Lost Woods in Breath of the Wild is quite contradictory to this theory. There is a larger problem, however. This theory is practically quashed by Inoma himself. In another interview, he says, quote, "As you probably saw in the trailer, the most recent trailer, there's a woman's voice, and she says, 'The history of the royal family of Hyrule is also the history of Calamity Ganon. And as you know, the Zelda series up until now is a history of repeated attacks by Ganon,' end quote. Notice the wording there. Ganon. Not Ganondorf, Ganon. So we know that this game takes place after Ocarina of Time, in a timeline that has Ganon at least twice, and is at the very end of a timeline. We know that must take place at the end of a timeline because before the 100-year gap before the actual game, there is a 10,000-year gap before that, and the end of a timeline is the only place where enough legroom, time-wise, is available. This completely eliminates the adult Link timeline since we only see Ganondorf and no Ganon. That leaves the child timeline and the fallen hero timeline, since they both have Ganon at least twice in each of them. A lot of people think that this game takes place somewhere in the child Link timeline. The main evidence for this is pretty clear-cut. In one of the memories Link has, Zelda mentions 3 time periods that are specific to a Zelda game: Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess.
Skyward bound, adrift in time, or steeped in the glowing embers of twilight, the sacred blade is forever bound to the soul of the hero.
It's pretty hard to argue when the princess directly references another game in the series that takes place in the timeline where Breath of the Wild could possibly take place in. Another piece of evidence is the Bridge of Hylia in Breath of the Wild, which looks a lot like the Bridge of Hylia from Twilight Princess. There is more evidence to support this: the fact that Castletown originated on the Great Plateau. Watch Zeltik's theory about it here to understand. It also matches up with the Bridge of Hylia perfectly, if the Great Plateau had been there since Twilight Princess. In Zeltik's video, he mentions that there is a major geographical error, namely that the Great Plateau, with what remains of both Castletown and Hyrule Castle, is in the wrong place. Why that is, no one is actually certain, but considering the original location of Hyrule Castle Twilight Princess Edition, that means that the Bridge of Hylia is in the wrong place too, meaning that there is a possibility that this is an entirely different Bridge of Hylia. Hylia herself is mentioned several times in the game, with her name being said more than 240 times minimum, mostly being said by the monks. The Bridge of Hylia isn't the only thing geographically incorrect with this theory, however. Gerudo Valley is in the wrong place also, even if you do the GameCube reverse map. It is in the west then, yes, but it is above the Faron/Lost Woods. It should be in the southwestern corner. Speaking of which, the Lost Woods is also in the wrong place. You know what? Who cares about the map details? Disregarding those, this could still take place in the child timeline since the words are from Princess Zelda herself, right? Well, it is still a possibility, but there are a few last pieces of counter evidence that I found. The first is the Master Sword. Yes, in Twilight Princess it's found in the Lost Woods, but comparing the location from Twilight Princess to the location in Breath of the Wild reveals something. There are ruins of the Temple of Time from Twilight Princess around the Master Sword, but none from Breath of the Wild. The second is the Forest Sword, or lack thereof. If this game takes place at the end of the child timeline, there has to be some location, ruins, or even just reference to the Forest Sword from Forest Sword's adventures for one main reason. Ganon was sealed inside the Forest Sword. If he somehow broke free from the Forest Sword seal as Calamity Ganon, there has to be at the very least some sort of reference or hidden location as to the Forest Sword or its seal. If there was some sort of ancient Hylian text, wouldn't they be scattered somewhere in the world for the player to find in Breath of the Wild? But there isn't. This is the strongest counter evidence in my opinion. This makes me personally believe that Breath of the Wild was not meant to be in the child timeline. And Zelda's dialogue was just referencing Nintendo's 3 favorite Zelda games. If you think that sentence is false, just look at the 2014 release of Hyrule Warriors. Yes, the game isn't canon to the series, but where are the fragments of Ganon's soul located? In the eras of Sky, Time, and Twilight. The same 3 Zelda mentions in Breath of the Wild. I mean, it's not like she can say, whether skyward bound, adrift in time, or transforming into wall art. Is it possible that I'm overthinking this and the game actually does exist in the child timeline? Yes, this is just a theory after all. So if I'm correct, this leaves only the Fallen Hero timeline left, and there is actually a ton of supporting evidence for Breath of the Wild to take place here. The first bit of evidence is the Dueling Peaks themselves. They are remarkably similar to those 2 mountains you see in the original Legend of Zelda artwork. Maybe they actually are the Dueling Peaks. Again, just a theory. More evidence is on the Great Plateau, which we have established to be the ruins of Castle Town and Hyrule Castle from Ocarina of Time. If this takes place in the Fallen Hero timeline, that would mean that Link went through the final battle with Ganon. If you remember correctly, then Castle Town and Hyrule Castle were completely obliterated from Ganondorf trying to destroy Link and Zelda in a last-ditch effort. In Breath of the Wild, you see the ruins of Castle Town and what's possibly Hyrule Castle. On a side note, this provides some more counter evidence for the child timeline theory, because while some of Hyrule Castle was blown up in Twilight Princess, we see in the end credits that the castle was rebuilt in the same spot, not a completely different spot, where Breath of the Wild Hyrule's castle resides. I know what you're thinking. If the map with Twilight Princess doesn't match up with Breath of the Wild, does the map from A Link to the Past match? I'm gonna be honest, not really. I looked at both maps and the only similarities I could find was Gerudo Valley's location in the far southwest, and I guess Lake Hylia might work, but that's more of a stretch. That doesn't mean there isn't any evidence at all. In fact, one of the strongest pieces of evidence comes once again from our good old friend the Master Sword, giving some of the best evidence in this theory. Back on track, the Master Sword is found in the Lost Woods in Breath of the Wild. And where is the Master Sword found in all the times it appears in the Fallen timeline? In the Lost Woods. And that's not even the best part. There's a tiny detail that some people have noticed, myself included. Look at this image. You can see 3 white flowers around the Master Sword. What do you see in Breath of the Wild? 3 white flowers surrounding the Master Sword. In the same arrangement, no less. But again, that detail is a bit of a stretch. Another bit of evidence is in what the old man says in the beginning of the game. He says that the kingdom of Hyrule has been in a state of decline. Could he be referring to the Great Calamity 100 years ago? That would be most likely, but there is also the possibility that he is talking about the decline of the kingdom after the fall of the hero in Ocarina of Time. The era during Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 is actually formally called the Era of Decline. If Breath of the Wild takes place after Zelda 2, then that bit of dialogue would make a whole lot more sense. I know you're probably riling on me because I deny the word of a royal princess, but accept the word of a homeless old man. Well, I'll have you know that that old guy is... But I digress. While there is a lot more evidence, there is one final strong piece of evidence. Evidence that I believe is so strong that pretty much cements this theory into the Fallen Hero timeline. And this evidence can be found in the diary of King Roam Bosphoramus Hyrule. In the first entry he says, "Today, as the sun rose and a new day was born, my daughter too joined the sweet world. In keeping with the traditions of the royal family, I have decided to name her Zelda." I may not have played every Zelda game, but I have looked and found the single only other game that directly mentions the tradition of naming the daughter in the royal family Zelda is in Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. Yes, it goes without saying that there is a certain trend in the royal family before Zelda 2 to name the daughter Zelda, but if we look at every timeline as an individual timeline each, the name of Zelda has only been used a handful of times. And remember that these games sometimes have thousands of years in between them, so if we look at that, the name Zelda isn't exactly common, and there couldn't be any other princess in between games named Zelda, or else Demise's curse would probably kick in and reincarnate some form of Ganon. One thing we can all agree on is that the criteria for having Demise's hate come after you is that there must be a princess named Zelda, and there must be a hero named Link. I can't say for certainty whether there have been multiple Links or Zeldas named out of respect for the princess and the hero, but I believe that there would be a lot more reincarnations of Demise if there was. There still might be. After all, the series isn't over yet. There is one last problem with this theory, however, and that's the fact that Ganon is dead by the end of the Fallen Hero timeline. The entire plot point of Zelda 2 is Ganon's minions are trying to revive him. Have you hit a roadblock for this theory? No, actually. There are two explanations for this problem. Number 1, Ganon's minions found a different way to revive him, or number 2, and this is the more probable theory, Calamity Ganon and Ganon from Zelda 1 and 2 are completely different Ganons. Before you think option number 2 is far too absurd to actually be possible, I found evidence that proves this theory is not only possible, but has happened before in the Zelda timeline. I present to you 4 Swords Adventures. In the game, the main antagonist is Ganon, but it's confirmed that this Ganon has been reincarnated from Twilight Princess's Ganon. Who's to say that this can't happen in a different timeline? Is there still the possibility this takes place in the child timeline because of that one line of dialogue from Zelda? Most certainly. But because of all the other evidence, I firmly believe that the Breath of the Wild takes place roughly some 10,000 plus years after The Legend of Zelda 2. So that's where I put Breath of the Wild. I hope you liked this video because I put a lot of time and thought into this theory, and I just can say that I'm really proud of this video. What do you think of this video? Is there any other evidence I missed? Do you agree with my theory? Is there some other theory that you believe? Let me know in the comments below and leave a like on this video and subscribe to be notified of my next videos when they come out. So until I see you now, that's all I have for now. So until I see you all next time, bye bye!